At Thanksgiving dinner, my father set his knife down, the silver gleaming in the light, and said, "Your sister was born to live a comfortable life, and you make money to support her. If that's a problem, the door's right there." His voice wasn't loud, but it was steady and cold, cutting deeper than any shout. My mother froze mid-motion, her hand suspended in the air. Harper chewed without a care, and the world seemed to come to a halt. I didn't argue. I quietly gathered my plate, folded the napkin, and smiled as if the joke had finally clicked. "I guess you'll take care of the bills then." They chuckled, but it was a quick, uneasy laugh. I joined in, because what they didn't know was that the meal they just devoured had already cost them everything. When people ask, "What broke me that night?" they expect some dramatic moment, a single sharp crack that split everything apart. But the truth is, cracks had been forming for years, silently spreading beneath the surface of the Marino household. That dinner was just when the light finally shone on them. I grew up behind the counter of Marino Art and Supply, the store my parents ran in Santa Fe. To most it seemed charming handmade brushes, glass jars, shelves full of watercolor tubes, the faint scent of turpentine and paper. But behind that bell that jingled sweetly with every customer, there was a quiet divide. My father, Richard, ran the business like an empire, while my mother, Elena, floated between the aisles, pretending to keep everything balanced. Harper, the so-called artist, glided through it all, adored and untouched by responsibility. I wasn't sunlight, I was structure. "You're the practical one," Dad always said, like people describe cement necessary but unnoticed. I stayed late to balance receipts, file orders, clean pallets stained with acrylic, and build display walls for weekend sales. Harper painted on the same tables I wiped clean, and every smudge she left behind was called creative residue. When I was 11, I won a youth design competition sponsored by the state's architecture board. I came home with the certificate, grinning. Dad skimmed it, nodded once, and said, "Good, now help your sister organize her paints." A month later, Harper finger painted a sunset at school. Mom framed it, made copies, and sold them at the store for $10 each. Customers fawned over her natural gift, while mine was efficiency. Hers was grace. By high school, I was managing the register on weekends, designing flyers, and handling invoices. Harper skipped shifts to sketch downtown. When she wanted to host a pop-up art night, I set up the tables, arranged the lighting, and managed the guests. When it flopped, Dad told her failure was part of being an artist. When I made the store profitable that summer, he called it luck. I went to SCAD on a partial scholarship, graduated with honors, and became a curator, the kind that decides what's worth showing. I organized exhibitions all over Santa Fe's art district. My name started appearing in press write-ups, and my parents bragged to anyone who'd listen. "That's our daughter, the one who works with real artists." But the pride stopped the second I set boundaries. Independence wasn't respected. It was resented. Still, when the mortgage was overdue, I sent money. When Harper's projects failed, I quietly paid suppliers to keep the store's reputation intact. Every transfer felt like buying peace. Mom always said, "Family helps family." I believed it until I realized I wasn't helping. I was enabling favoritism. The irony was they thought the Thanksgiving table was about gratitude. They didn't know it was my last act of it. The week before Thanksgiving, I barely slept. Between finalizing the winter exhibition and reviewing loaned works from 2 private collectors, I was running on caffeine and adrenaline. Still, I drove to my parents' house the night before the holiday like I always did. Some habits die harder than love. The house looked the same as it had for 20 years. The cracked adobe walls, the crooked Marino Art and Supply sign hanging from one chain, the faint scent of oil paint still lingering. But inside, everything felt smaller. Or maybe I had simply outgrown it. Harper was already there, lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She was wearing a camel-colored coat that probably cost more than my rent. "Mom and Dad surprised me," she said, tilting her wrist to show off a gold bracelet. "It's for my art reel milestone." A milestone. The reel had 500 likes. I set my bag down and smiled thinly. Congratulations, I said, the words dry on my tongue. Dad walked in, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Kate, did you bring the cranberry chutney? He asked, not looking up. Yeah, it's in the kitchen. Fridge. Good, he said. Make sure it's plated right before dinner. You know, presentation isn't your mom's strong suit. I almost laughed. I had curated entire museum exhibits with precise lighting and temperature control. But somehow my father still thought my most valuable skill was placing side dishes just right. Dinner started warmly, with the usual chorus of pleasantries and wine. Mom fussed over the table settings. Harper discussed her brand partnerships. I stayed quiet, carefully cutting my turkey into small, perfect pieces. Then Dad cleared his throat. That familiar signal that he was about to make something sting. Your sister's been doing so well lately, he said, smiling at Harper. We're proud of her. She was born to lift soft, you know. Always had that touch. The knife slipped slightly in my hand. Soft? I repeated. He nodded, either oblivious or deliberately so. Yeah, some people are made for beauty, others for the grind. You've always been good at keeping things running. My mother reached for her glass. Your father just means you're dependable, she added quickly, her eyes avoiding mine. Then Dad leaned back, napkin tossed aside, and said the line that would echo for months. If you have a problem with that, Kate, there's the door. No one moved. Harper smirked into her wine. Mom stared at the centerpiece like it could save her. That was the moment it stopped hurting. The moment everything went still. I realized this wasn't my family's first betrayal. It was just the first one I refused to clean up after. That night, I drove home in silence, without turning on the radio. The quiet felt cleaner than any song could. The headlights cut through the desert highway. Steady lines of truth, cold, bright, irreversible. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger. It was something sharper than anger. Something cold and oddly steady. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was observing, curating like always, except this time the exhibit was my own family. And I was done pretending their chaos was art. Mason was still awake when I walked into the apartment. My boyfriend had a camera in his lap, sorting through prints from his last shoot. He looked up immediately. How bad? He asked, watching me hang my coat and take off my shoes. Bad enough to end it, I said. All of it. He waited, as he always did. I told him everything about the toast, the silence, the way Harper smiled like she had finally won a game I never agreed to play. I expected my voice to shake somewhere in the retelling, but it didn't. It came out calm, almost detached, as if I were describing someone else's life. So what now? Mason asked. I opened my laptop and pulled up my financial folders. The screen's glow reflected in the window, casting both of us in pale blue. Now, I said, I stopped funding my own humiliation. For nearly 4 years. I had been transferring money every month, mortgage payments, supplier bills, the occasional temporary loan. All neatly logged in folders titled Family Support, Business Help, Harper Supplies. I started deleting auto-pay authorizations one by one. Mortgage account. Remove access. Supplier line. Revoke approval. It felt like cutting invisible wires that had been holding me hostage. Mason didn't interrupt. He just handed me a mug of tea. The way you offer a towel to someone who stepped out of the wreckage. By midnight, I had drafted a short email to my father, mother, and the store's business account. Effective immediately, I'm ending all financial contributions and access to shared accounts. Please remove my name from store operations. Kate. I didn't add threats or explanations, just that. Precision is its own language. The next morning, I woke up early, not from anxiety, but from clarity. I showered, dressed, and drove to the gallery. My assistant, Clara, looked surprised to see me. You're working today? She asked. Yeah, I said, flipping through the exhibition plan. I'm renaming the winter show. She blinked. To what? Boundaries. The title hit me like oxygen. Suddenly, every piece made sense. The sculpture's about containment, the paintings about negative space, the installations that used glass walls instead of open rooms. It wasn't just art anymore. It was a message. 3 days later, the phone started ringing. First Mom, then Dad, then Harper. I didn't answer. I just watched the missed calls pile up like brushstrokes, desperate, uneven, loud. Voicemails poured in. Kate, the mortgage payment bounced. Call us. Your mother's not sleeping. Hey sis, maybe you confront me a little until my collab clears. Each one went straight to archive. That weekend, I wandered through the nearly finished exhibit alone. The lights were dim. The gallery quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system. I paused in front of a piece I had almost discarded, a cracked mirror suspended from the ceiling, its shards catching and distorting the reflection of anyone who stood beneath it. I stared at my fractured reflection and thought, finally, it looks honest. Outside, snow began to fall softly, slowly, unbothered. For once, so was I. The first voicemail came at 8:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. My father's voice was tight, clipped. Kate, the supplier accounts are locked. I need you to fix it. No greeting, no apology, just command. By noon, my mother called. Her tone was the opposite. Sweet, desperate, trembling. Your father's stressed. We're behind on the mortgage again. Could you just cover this month? Just this one. Then Harper's message arrived. Sing-song and self-assured. Hey sis, we're planning a new art night at the store. I need you to send $10,000 to secure the space. I'll put your name on the promo, promise. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't have to. The silence would speak. By the third day, the emails came. Payment overdue. Supplier suspension notice. Past due warning. Every digital echo of the very system I had maintained for years now turned against them. For once, the business they'd treated like a family heirloom was showing what it really was, an unpaid bill dressed as legacy. I drove past the store that Friday afternoon. Not to gloat, but to see the place objectively. The window displays I once designed were faded now. Harper's prints were still taped up, sun-bleached and curling at the edges. A handwritten sign read, "Closed early, family emergency." Inside, I saw my father pacing, phone pressed to his ear. My mother stood behind the counter, clutching her back. Harper sat on a stool, scrolling, pretending it wasn't happening. The sight should have hurt. Instead, it settled me. For the first time, I wasn't part of their performance. That evening, Aunt Lillian called. She never called unless it mattered. Your parents are in trouble, she said. I've sent a notice about deductions from Harper's Gallery this year. They claimed business expenses that don't exist. And they listed you as a secondary guarantor. She let the words hang. But the audit only goes back 3 years. You can clear your name easily, Kate, but they can't. That night, I drafted one final message to my parents and Harper. I've been notified about the tax discrepancies tied to the store. I'm not involved, and I'll be submitting the required separation documents this week. Please refrain from listing my name on any future filings or accounts. No emotion. No threat. Just truth, cold, final and irreversible. By Saturday, my father showed up at my apartment. I heard the knock before I saw him on the security camera. Same leather jacket. Same authority that used to make me freeze. He didn't look angry this time. He looked small. Open the door, Katie, he said. I didn't. He spoke through the crackling speaker. You think you can just walk away? This family falls apart without you. I pressed the intercom. Then maybe it should. He banged once, hard. You owe us after everything we've done. I laughed before I could stop myself. You're right, I said softly. And I finally paid in full. Then I ended the call. By Sunday, the store's credit was frozen. Harper posted a vague Instagram story about toxic energy and family betrayal, which ironically went viral enough for the local paper to pick up the story. That Monday, I arrived at the gallery early to meet with the press about boundaries. The irony didn't escape me. The same people who once told me to stay behind the scenes were now watching my name headline the city's art page. The exhibition opening was full of curators, collectors, artists I'd admired for years. I walked through the crowd, greeting guests, adjusting lights. The mirror installation glimmered under the track lamps, its shards catching the room in hundreds of fractured reflections. Halfway through the night, Mason touched my arm. "They're here," he murmured. I turned. My parents stood near the doorway. Richard in his old blazer, Elena clutching her purse like a lifeline. Harper trailed behind them, her face pale under her makeup. Wrong time in the wrong place. But sometimes that's exactly when freedom finds you. It's not always a clean break. It's a messy, imperfect evolution, a patchwork of decisions and realizations. And for the first time, I was living for myself, not for their expectations or their debts. I was free. The gallery was empty now, but I still felt their presence in the shadows of the lights. The people who came, the ones who stood and watched as my life unraveled and rebuilt itself in real time. That was the beauty of it. The exhibition wasn't just about art. It was about me reclaiming my space, my voice, and my peace. Mason's smile lingered in my mind long after the show ended. He was right. This was mine, all of it. And with that final note, with no words left unsaid, I knew I had crafted a new life, far from the chaos they'd created, far from the expectations that once crushed me. I left that letter behind not to provoke, but to close the chapter, to mark the final line of a story they wouldn't get to rewrite. I would not go back. And somewhere, in the stillness that followed, I could finally hear the sound of my own heart beating in freedom.